Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rick McCutcheon. I'm a Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement MVP, and I'm here today with my good friend Benton to talk about EasyTerritory and mapping for retailers and franchises. So this is a very, very interesting conversation we're going to have today, and we're going to show some specific case studies following some of EasyTerritory's customers. As well, if you're interested, we have a previous webinar series on territory mapping, as well as another one on field service. So those are both very, very good sessions. And the one on sales, I think we're going to keep expanding that into some different areas. So look for invites to that in the future. So today we're going to have an introduction to EasyTerritory if you're not familiar with it, along with a demo and an interactive Q&A session at the end. So Benton, why don't we turn it over to you and you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Rick. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to join us. Looking forward to this third webinar in the series around Dynamics 365. As Rick mentioned, we're going to focus on some use cases in the franchise and retail space and go through some of the interesting things that customers are doing with mapping and geospatial. So Rick's going to ask some questions along the way, and certainly if anybody as an attendee has any questions and wants to drop them in the chat window, please feel free to do so. So just to start off, to tell you a little bit about our company and how we got started, our very first customer was Five Guys Burgers and Fries, and they're always an exciting customer for me to tell the story about. They really saw the vision of what could be done with mapping and geospatial combined with Dynamics. And at that time, they were running Dynamics 2011, and they were using it to track all of their store locations, and they didn't have a good way to keep track of the franchise boundaries that they were selling. So we came in and helped them essentially come up with a solution for managing their boundaries on top of Bing Map, and then also overlay all of their store data on top of those boundaries. And it just really kind of grew from there. So they use it to manage all of their sales regions, their districts, and ultimately their franchise boundaries. They also use it to overlay their store data and then look at store information, specifically sales. They have columns on year-to-date sales, week-to-date sales, quarter-to-date sales, and that's all coming from their point of sale and financial system. And they're able to surface that information through Dynamics 365 and visualize that on the map. So today we'll cover some of those topics and how we integrate with Dynamics to do that level of mapping. They also needed the ability to overlay additional data sets like their vendors, their bakeries, their meat producers, to see sort of where they stood in the supply chain, because getting fresh bread was very important to their organization. And finally, they use demographic data to do expansion planning, and we'll talk a little bit about how demographic data can be very important for a franchise organization. So Rick, that's really how we got our start, and we've brought on a number of franchise customers and retail customers since then, and look forward to showing some of the use cases. Some of the benefits, and this next slide really covers at a high level some of the topics we went into much more detail in the first two webinars, so be sure to go back and view those. But for Dynamics customer engagement, specifically sales, being able to define your sales territories and see that information overlaid on a map, being able to bulk realign and assign data that you have in Dynamics. Now that's not as typical for a franchise, because when a franchise sells an area, those franchise boundaries typically stay pretty static. But for a sales organization that's selling products, they might do a lot of realignment. So in the first webinar, we talked a lot about territory alignment, lead assignment, and territory realignment. We also covered in the first webinar being able to use the tool for sales call planning, to put maps in the hands of your salespeople, to be able to look at travel time analysis and mobile mapping. Again, these are common use cases to a sales organization, maybe not as common to a franchise organization, but there's a lot of really interesting things that franchises are doing. For field service, being able to see all of their work orders and calls on a map, perform service territory management, managing big zip code lists, being able to do automated work order assignment based on geography and proximity, and as well as capacity planning. Finally, dynamics for marketing is an interesting one where you're able to look at geospatial analysis and perform that type of analysis, and see also creating marketing lists. And that is a use case that franchises could definitely leverage, or retail organizations could definitely leverage.
So I think, Benton, as we look into what a retailer is today, many people have sort of franchise or retail, but they may have a B2B division or a consumer division, much like a Staples. So I think the sort of the visual aspects of mapping are a very powerful tool, especially when you're planning routes, when you're planning where to put a new store or or a business front. It gives you a sort of a different level of understanding of what you're doing. And I think some of the stuff that you're going to show us around alignment is going to make a lot of sense for this market.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this next slide digs a little bit deeper into really the types of companies that a franchise or would use EasyTerritory. So the common one, fast food or fast casual food, like a Five Guys. We've had companies that provide legal services and have built a model around being able to provide legal services and then franchise that out as floors, and as well as residential flooring, cabinets, and storage solutions. From a product franchise perspective, think of like pest control companies that are national, plumbing companies that are national. We've helped organizations that specialize in a specific product, as well as manufacturing franchises. And the most common one there would be maybe like a soft drink company that creates the syrup that gets distributed out to all the different restaurants that goes in the soft drink machines there. From a retail perspective, definitely some of the common customer types would be consumer and packaged goods. Think of stocking thousands or tens of thousands of stores and keeping your product on the shelf, and the organizational and logistical problem that maps solve around that. And furniture is another big one that has a real geographic sense to it, especially when it comes to delivery of the product to the consumer. And so we're starting to build out on our website a number of case studies and industry studies that will dig into some of these in a bit more detail. But the primary use case in the franchise and retail industry is definitely boundary management. So being able to manage these geographic boundaries on a map. One very common way is by either zip code or county. Another way would be manually drawn shapes where you're manually drawing a territory. And to go back to the first customer that we talked about there, Five Guys, that was one of their main requirements. When they sold a franchise in a big city like Chicago, they're selling it down to the city block level. So they need a way to really digitize the boundary. But if they sell one in Florida, they're selling it multiple counties at a time. So being able to have a mix of geography when you're building these territories or these franchise boundaries is really important. So we'll look at building them based on geography or manually drawing them. What it's ultimately grown into, though, and we've had other customers use it for, is creating travel time rings around locations to define territories or areas of protection, as well as being able to do that with a radius. So creating a radius as the crow flies around a location and defining that as an area of protection.
Benton, many people try to do this with a spreadsheet today, right? And you just can't get that sort of, same level of intelligence from looking at data in that type of format.
That's right. That's right. And especially when we start to layer it all together, when we start putting stores and customers and demographics and territory boundaries all together, it's definitely something where an interactive map like Bing Maps or a Google Maps type of experience, if you will, can really bring the whole organization's data to life there, if you will. What we're also going to look at today is mapping data from Dynamics into the map and why you would want to do that, what that would look like. So pulling in store data. Another common use case is to analyze demographic data to be able to see, hey, in this zip code, what's the median household income? We're looking at putting a new store here, or our franchisee wants to put a new store here. How can we help them with site selection, for example? And then be able to provide detailed demographic information around your different territories and see how those are aligned. And then finally, we'll cover some delivery routing and as well as the weather overlay. This one was an interesting one that Five Guys had as a requirement from the very beginning. And I mentioned that they look at their supply chain. One of the things that's important in their model is getting that bread and getting it delivered at almost a daily basis. And when there's big storms that move across the country, that can impact bread delivery. So that's the weather overlay, seeing where their bakeries are, where their stores are, and how delivery might be impacted. All right, so enough of PowerPoint. Let's go ahead and jump into a demo here. All right. Okay. So just to tee things up or to kick it off, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in Dynamics today just because this is really the building blocks of the last two webinars. But one important concept that I just wanted to touch on prior was the fact that our EasyTerritory solution can help you geocode your data that's in Dynamics. And for some organizations, that's just customer account data that represents their store locations, for example. Some customers might actually track their end customer, the consumers, and being able to geocode that data is important when you want to be able to show it on the map. So we have a utility that attaches to a Dynamics CRM or 365 workflow that can geocode a store location or a new store location or a customer location on a map so that you can efficiently plot it on the map and then see the details of that store location. So one of the important concepts that we covered in the first webinar was geocoding the data. And why that's important is because you want to be able to efficiently pull the data in the map, visualize it, see it accurately, and do that in a very quick and efficient manner. When you bring in data sets from Dynamics, you can always jump back to Dynamics from a record. So for example, if we had a store location here, a franchisee had a store location here, we might want to click on the CRM, the Dynamics record here, and launch and bring that up in Dynamics here. Okay. All right. So from there, what an organization would want to do is build out their alignment of their franchises. Now, in this example, I already have some franchises built by postal code or by zip code here in Texas. But let's just say that we wanted to create a new territory and we wanted to expand maybe in Oklahoma City. Well, there's a few ways that you can build the territories using the map. You can zoom down into the map. You can turn on our demographic layer. And in this case, I have demographics by zip code. Let me just remove this filter. And when we look at demographics by zip code, it will actually show us a little dot indicating Now, where the median household income is high in an area. So maybe we want to focus on an area that has a pretty high median household income. So what we can do is we can use the drawing and selection tools to select some zip codes to build a franchise territory from. So I'm just going to use our lasso tool, which will allow me to quickly lasso an area and then query all of the zip codes that were within that area that I just drew. Now, once it queries those 11 zip codes, I can then look at our stats panel, and our stats panel will actually aggregate up and show us all of the demographic information that we brought in by zip code. So in this example, I had 3 attributes on my zip code data that were demographic. I have median household income, total occupied housing, total owner occupied housing. So we can see here that this data is relevant enough for us to make a territory from. So what we may do there is make territory, and we'll call this the OK city, and click OK, and then build the franchise boundary like so. So that gives us a quick and efficient way to build a franchise boundary by postal code. You may also want to manually draw a franchise boundary. To manually draw the franchise boundary, what you can do is just use the polygon drawing tool and digitize a boundary along a street network. So let's say that we wanted to just follow a corridor here. We can use the tool to quickly just digitize a boundary. We can zoom in to get really as detailed as we want here along the street center line. I'll just rough sketch it for right now, but you can always come back and add in some additional vertices here and just quickly draw and digitize your manually drawn boundary. And I'll just call this one OK City 2. All right. So that's a second way to draw a franchise boundary. And our system doesn't really care whether you've drawn a franchise boundary or a retail boundary by postal code or by manually drawing it. In our world, it's just a polygon and it's represented the same way or treated the same way. You can also do the same around point locations. So for example, if I wanted to maybe sell a franchise in Oklahoma City, but I wanted to do it within a 20-minute drive time of downtown, what we can do is drop a marker out on the map. So here's downtown. We can then use our travel time ring capability to create a route 20-minute in driving and traffic, and that will create a polygon that represents a franchise boundary. So again, no matter whether you've digitally drawn it or created it from zip codes or created it from a travel time ring, it's just a polygon in our world and can be defined as a boundary. You can also do rings as the crow flies. So for example, if we wanted to say, show us a 1 mile radius around a location, we can create that as well.
So Benton, I see that when we did our first sort, it was on demographics by zip, right? Mm-hmm. On median income. So let's say somebody was a business to business company and I was going to put a territory in, and I need to know in an area how many companies have over 25 employees. So I could go out to someone like D&B and purchase that data, bring it into Dynamics, and then use that to build my maps?
That's exactly right. So if you're buying third-party demographic data, or if you need to get data from the census that we don't have out of the box, what you can do is just use our data upload feature. And our data upload feature will just allow you to upload a spreadsheet of data. So if that's just a spreadsheet of data by zip code or by county boundary, or if it's business location data where you have the full street address, you can plot that information in the application just by going through this upload dialog.
And then we could actually sort by who's an existing customer today and then who's a prospect?
Yeah, so you would probably need to do a little bit of data manipulation to reconcile who is an actual customer. You could have that information as one layer. So you could have all of your customers as one layer, and then you could have your demographic data that you've purchased brought in as a second layer. And what that allows you to do when you start to overlay this data together, when you use our stats capability, so let's just look, for example, at the Dallas-Fort Worth territory that we've drawn here. We can see some statistics on that just in our stats panel down here to the right. So we can see total number of franchise stores, total number of customers, and then we can look at the demographic data by zip code here. So you're right, Rick, as you bring in additional data sets, whether that's data coming from Dynamics or coming through Common Data Service or coming from a spreadsheet that you've purchased and uploaded, you can combine that data so that you can see it in the stats panel combined. So for example, that would be something that looks like this. All right. So in this next example, let's just take a look at it from maybe a site selection standpoint. So I have a franchisee that wants to open another store. So they want to work with us to determine where the best place in the Fort Worth market would be to open up another store. So we can see what the scope of their franchise is. We can see their store locations that they currently have operating. We've actually color-coded the store locations based on calendar year 2018 revenue, so we know which stores perform the best in their area or in their territory, and which are in their franchise boundary, and which ones perform the worst. So we can see that, and this data is just coming from our CRM, and that could be really just surfaced through your point of sale system and aggregated in CRM over periods of time there. But so let's just say that we see that there's a lot of customers here in this area of the Fort Worth area. So one of the first things we might want to do is just do some travel time analysis from these store locations. You know, I'm just kind of curious where these customers are coming from and which store is really the closest to them. So one thing that we can do is use our drawing and selection tools to just lasso an area. So for example, let's lasso all of the stores that are in this area. And we can query those. We can query those store locations. So there's 4 store locations there. And then what we might do is create some travel rings around those and say, okay, you know, we know on average that a customer is not willing to drive more than 7 or 8 minutes to get to our store location. So let's just put in 7 minutes and click create and create some 7-minute travel time rings. So we can see that, you know, a 7-minute travel time ring from this store location does capture some of these customers, but not all of them. So if we wanted to then look and see, okay, maybe we might want to put a store location here at this area. So I showed the demographic data just as little dots on the map, and those are at the center points of the zip code, but we can also include a map of the data here. Okay, and this layer actually fills in the zip code polygons to give you a little bit better visual of the median household income and where they fall. So if we wanted to say, let's look at the zip code that has the zip codes that have the highest median household income, we can see that there's a fair bit of them around this. Not our customers aren't really in there, but they're near there. And that was actually one thing that Five Guys Burgers and Fries told us very early on, that they didn't necessarily want to be in the areas that had the highest median household income, but they didn't want to be in the ones that had the lowest median household income. They wanted to be somewhere right in the middle. So what you could do is you could use the tool to kind of just drill down and find those sweet spots that you're looking at. So here we can see that this median household income between 43 and 65,000 really is kind of in that sweet spot area where we have some customers. And so what we might do from there is just use the tools to drill down into the area. You can drop a pin out there. So if you just were to search like North Richland Hills, you can drop a pen out there. You could also click this icon, and what that's going to do, that's going to open this up in Bing Maps. So that's going to give you a better bird's eye view. So here we have, what could be a strip shopping center that we want to look at for potential site selection. We can also just zoom and navigate the Bing Maps map around and see sort of what that area looks like at a bird's eye view.
This is an incredible time saver, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that when you start to pull all of the data together, it does make site selection a lot easier and faster, and you can distribute this workload across the organization more, where you wouldn't necessarily have to have a team that's specifically around site selection, so to speak. All right. So from here, what you may do is you may want to add this, you may want to add this as a proposed site in your CRM. So you can just simply start to build out a proposed site list in Dynamics and then map that data as well. All right, so a couple of the other things that I thought would be interesting to show would be using the marketing list capabilities if you wanted to possibly create a marketing list of your customers. So here I have some contact data that's all customers that have visited my stores in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And again, if I wanted to pull in my store's data, I can pull that information in. And then you can change the color of these so that they pop out a little bit better. All right. And then let's just say that I wanted to, from a particular store location, run some sort of promo that was within a certain distance of that store location. So for example, I've got a store here in downtown Fort Worth. I want to create a travel time ring. Let's say no more than 30 minutes driving. Click create. What that's going to do is that's going to create a travel time ring around that store location. We can then query these contacts. So we can query all 108 contacts that were within that 20-minute drive time of that store location. And then if we click our export button, we can export this data to a marketing list in Dynamics. And so what that's going to do is that's going to push those 108 contacts down as well. One other common use case that we've seen is creating these boundaries, and when a new customer may come into the CRM system or may register on the website or download an app, once they've submitted their address, is be able to use that address and their location to add them to a marketing list. So if you want to create dynamic marketing lists that are defined by polygons, really just geofencing around an area, if you will, we have the means and the capability to add a record dynamically to a dynamic marketing list in that way. Okay, so that covers the marketing list there and the demographics and the building of the territories. The final thing that I wanted to show was just the routing capability. And one of the main reasons I wanted to show the routing capability is just to talk through some of the use cases. We didn't really cover it in too much depth on the sales or field service webinar, but it is a use case that customers in the retail space have used EasyTerritory for. And the routing is typically used in a scenario where an organization needs to do delivery. And that organization has the flexibility to show up at that location based on the stop order that our system gives you. So there's a few different ways to do the routing, and I'm just going to use this demo data to do the routing as an example. But let's just say that I need to do a delivery to all of these locations around this store in Fort Worth. What you can do with the tool is make a lasso around the area that you want to do a delivery to. So I see that there's 13 stops there. I can click query and query those to my results grid. And then what I can do is just select that store location in my data results grid as well. And then I just simply click route. And then it'll bring up a routing dialog that'll let you put in some parameters. You can put in the current start time. You can put in the stop time at each location. So let's just say that it's a 15-minute delivery at each location. You can put that in. You can say, okay, give me time with traffic. That means it's going to take into account traffic conditions. Optimize waypoints means that it's going to put these routes in a certain stop order. So it's going to put these stops in a logical stop order based on proximity to one another.
So Benton, what data is it using for traffic?
We use Bing Maps or Azure Maps for traffic data. So we have support for both of those mapping platforms from Microsoft. Bing Maps and Azure Maps both have traffic data services that they use. So when we create a route, it's ultimately using Bing Maps or Azure Maps under the hood. So here with the processing quality, that's just how long our algorithm's going to run. A circuit means that we're going to go from our store location, hit these 13 stops, and go back to our store location. So go ahead and click create, and it will create those routes and give us a stop order. So it gives us a stop order column. From here, we have the capability to push this data back into a custom entity in CRM to create a queue. So if you needed this data to flow back into Dynamics, there is the capability of doing that. That would just be if you wanted to create take the results of this route and push it back into CRM. You could also see the results of this route, including the travel time and the total time that it would take to drive that route, as well as the total number of miles. So it gives you these details, and then again, it does account for traffic congestion. You can also put in a certain time of day, and it would account for traffic congestion there as well. Another common use case for the routing with franchises is if executive management is going to go visit a series of store locations across a large area. So we've had a few of our franchise customers where their executive management needed to plan a trip where they go and basically do a blitz where they're visiting stores, maybe 5 stores a day, and they're going for a week and they're on the road traveling from city to city going through those. So what you can do in that scenario is just, instead of just lassoing an area and drawing a route, you can just use the tool to manually select some locations. So if you want to, and I'll just pretend for a second here that I have all of my stores out here, and that we need to create a route for our executives, and we knew that they were going to be starting from downtown Fort Worth, from our corporate headquarters that morning. They can drop a marker out there. And then if they wanted to go visit some stores, and I'll just pick some stores here in the Austin area or just out here in the middle of nowhere, you can select the stores that they may want to go visit. And so let's just pick a couple more here. And then ultimately they would end up back at the Fort Worth area. So what you can do is click route. And then if they knew that they were going to be at each store for 2 hours, they were going to start at 7 a.m. and that they were going to start and end back in Fort Worth, click create, And what it does is it creates an optimized route with travel times between the store locations. So you can have estimated arrival time and all of that information so that you can more accurately plan, hey, here's how long it's going to take for our team to do this blitz to hit all of these stores.
You know, when I look at you mapping this data, and I think about things like survey results from our customers, because we have surveys in Dynamics. We could map that, or customer service tickets, or there's a lot of different scenarios that we could start to look at.
That's right. Yeah, and I think that that's one opportunity that Microsoft and Microsoft partners have, is really just the scope of the Dynamics platform that can be leveraged to do these different things. So, we're looking at data flowing, in this case, mostly from Dynamics 365 for sales, but also thinking about the point of sale system, if that's Dynamics for retail, how information's flowing back through common data service, how ticket and service request information from the stores, and maybe leveraging field service in that manner to help support some use cases like that. I think that that's a real big opportunity for Microsoft and Microsoft's partners and ISVs like ourselves.
Yeah, I did a project a few years back for an armored car company, and it was a challenge for them because they had these armored cars going on these routes. Who were the prospective prospects that were on these routes that they weren't getting to? Because this is who their salespeople needed to call on. The same as I had a snowplow landscaping franchise doing the same sort of thing, and that was always a challenge to say, okay, this is the route all our customers are on. We need to stay on this route to stay profitable. So I'm certainly going to ping them both and suggest they look at EasyTerritory.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's another point to bring up, is the notion of being able to see and visualize by color. So we visualized the stores by their revenue. We visualized the zip codes by their median household income, but being able to look at the customer data and see if you're tracking, an indicator from a survey result that you might want to look at, or if you have a loyalty score or something like that you're tracking in Dynamics, so that you can visually see that information on the map. You can color code, you can drill down into it and see, okay, well, where are my customers with A and B loyalty, and what's their proximity to our retail outlet location. So being able to overlay that data, be able to, in an ad hoc manner, color code and classify and filter that data on the map is really an important and powerful thing.
And, I think with these retailers, where a lot of them are starting home delivery, we know where our customers are, we know where our stores are, but I think there's going to be a big challenge in the future where these drop centers are, right in the middle of these different customer mixes.
Absolutely. So some of our bigger retail customers absolutely have a model of having warehouse locations where they're actually sending their trucks off from each day. So that's a very common scenario. And that would just be another layer on the map. So you have your retail outlet locations, you have your customer locations, you also have your warehouse locations. And that really drives an opportunity with finance and operations, in my opinion, Dynamics 365 or F&O, and so that you can really start to gain insight on where all of your assets are and where all of your customers are, and how they can be combined together to really come up with the best logistical solution to get their products delivered. All right. Well, that covers a lot of what I wanted to show today. Certainly the licensing and pricing we covered on the last two webinars. I'll just talk about it really quickly. Our licensing model, we do license this by total number of users. So that just depends on whether you're how many users you need to have access to the application. Our version that integrates with Dynamics 365 365 is our enterprise version. We can either cloud host it for a customer or you can install it on premises. And then there's a nice calculator on our website where you can use it to just figure out how many users you might need. You don't have to license every user of Dynamics, but you can use that to see our pricing there. The other thing that I'll just mention is that we do offer free trials. We'd like to talk to the company about their trial requirements and objectives, but if anyone's interested in a free trial, you can just click this free trial button here, and that'll just bring you to a simple registration form that will take your information, and then somebody from our sales team will reach out to you to set up a call to get started with the free trial. EasyTerritory is also available on Microsoft's App Source, so you can start a free trial from App Source as well.
So Benton, when I look at this is a very powerful application, and it's going to be new to a lot of companies when they get it for the first time. How do they get their people trained to be able to understand, not just what to do, but, the capabilities available in EasyTerritory?
Yep, that's a great question. So what we support is in our subscription model, we include training, support, and integration hours with that. So an enterprise customer would get 16 hours of support per year. So those 16 hours would be used to do things like help your organization get it set up and integrated with Dynamics 365, help kind of flesh out any requirements that you have around that integration, any customizations that you might want to make to your CRM to support some of the use cases now that a mapping application is part of the mix. We also provide web-based training that we can do as either recorded or pre-recorded or live for a customer, and we typically would do that around their specific use cases and workflows. We also have a docs section on our website that includes a lot of help documentation and training videos on how to do some of the specific tasks that I've shown here today, especially territory building, integrating data from different data sources, being able to perform ad hoc analysis.
So Benton, if somebody had an older version of Dynamics CRM per se, how far back do you support?
We support back to 2011. At 2011, there were some limitations, and we can discuss those with an organization if required. But we do support back to 2011. Certainly starting at 2013 and beyond, we have pretty much the full capabilities with that platform.
And if I had, one set of data, let's say I had my franchises in CRM or Dynamics 365, and I had 2 or 3 other data sets in other systems, I could just bring it all into Dynamics, or you were saying you could use Excel spreadsheets to bring the data over?
Yep. So this is probably going to be a whole nother webinar in and of itself, but we do have several means other than just pulling from Dynamics or uploading spreadsheet. We have a service that we offer called the Ingestion Service, and what that allows you to do is to push to a secure FTP site a data feed. So you can push that to a feed. Our system behind the scenes will process that data set, load it into the EasyTerritory application. So all you have to do is open up a project that has that data already loaded, and you can push data to the ingestion service at whatever frequency you want. We have some customers that push data, once a day or once a week. We have some that push data every couple of minutes. So that would be if you wanted to integrate with like SAP or Oracle CRM or something like that, where we didn't have a direct connector to that CRM, but you wanted to surface the data from those systems in EasyTerritory. But one of the things that we're most excited about that we're working towards are connectors through the Common Data Service. So being able to consume data through the Common Data Service. So you could pull in data directly from finance and operations at some point, or maybe down the road retail coming through the Common Data Service. So that's one thing to just be on the lookout for announcement-wise from us in the coming months here.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Common Data Service is the new Power Application platform that Microsoft's putting out there, which is going to be the common data model between all their applications. So, right now, EasyTerritory integrates with, Dynamics CRM, but in the future, all these different products are going to come online to support this model. So it's going to be some very exciting times for data.
Yeah, and especially having all of the systems tied together. So let's take the account data. Just having one account record that is used from the sales view, or CRM, if you will, for one from the financials view, which is finance and operations, but then one from the retail view as well. So being able to pull that information together through a single data source, that we really see that as a future and kind of a powerful capability there.
So Benton, I don't see any other questions coming in on the chat. So, we talked about pricing. We talked about the free trial. We've got two recordings up on your YouTube channel now, or on your website, and this one will be recorded and added to that group, I assume?
Yep, absolutely. So as in the next few hours, we'll have that published out to our website, so you can take a look at that. We talked about how you could get started with the trial if you want. We talked about some of the things related to Common Data Service that's coming down the pike. We also have some exciting stuff coming for Power BI as well that we'll plan to do a webinar around. But yeah, if there's any questions or additional follow-up that anybody has, they can certainly feel free to reach out to me directly. My email address is just benton@easyterritory.com. We're also on LinkedIn, so if anybody wants to connect with us there, please feel free to do that. But yeah, Rick, this has been a fun webinar series for us, and I appreciate everything that you've done to help put this on. And if there are no more questions, we can call it a day.
Okay, Benton, thank you very much, and we'll see you on our next session.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Take care, everyone. Bye now.